Hey everyone, my name is Akshay Ram. I'm a product manager with AWS App Runner. Welcome to this broadcast. I've been a product manager in AWS App Runner since its launch. And I also manage Beanstalk, and prior to this, I was a product manager with AWS Fargate. So here's the agenda for today. We're going to discuss what is AWS App Runner and the kind of applications that you can run on the service. We're going to discuss why we built App Runner. There are many services in AWS where you can build and run applications. So what makes App Runner unique? And we'll also look at some of the benefits. Then we'll go through how do you use App Runner. Here I'm actually going through the console screen. So I'm going to be going through a live demo and showing you a variety of use cases on how to use the service. Then I'm going to talk about the similarities and differences between Beanstalk and App Runner. Beanstalk is a service which is similar to App Runner in that it helps you run applications easily. So they are similar in many regards where you can port your applications across from one to the other, but they're also different. So we'll walk through those differences as well. And finally, we'll look at the roadmap and what's coming next for each of these services. So let's get started. What is AWS App Runner? AWS App Runner provides a really highly abstracted managed experience to run web applications and APIs. These web applications and APIs can either be container images or packaged directly as source code. And App Runner handles all aspects of infrastructure scaling, load balancing, traffic encryption, building and executing your code. So all of that is fully managed. And what you get is a service that is super streamlined for running web applications and APIs. The very common use cases you see on App Runner is you have applications that are, for instance, popular frameworks like Flask, if you like Python, or Express, if you like Node. And you don't have to be limited to those. You can use any of your favorite web service framework. And the applications could be front-end and back-end applications, mobile applications, APIs, and microservices. So these are the use cases you'd use some of these web applications for. And you can run them on App Runner today. Why did we actually build App Runner? And sure, there's ways to run web applications, and there are many other places you can run web applications in AWS. But why specifically App Runner? Before we answer that question, we're going to look into, what is the typical application architecture you have for building and running web applications. You have a virtual machine where you have your OS, your language runtime, and your application itself. And this is essentially layers of business logic you own and manage. You have multiple copies of your VM for the purposes of scaling and redundancy. You usually set up a load balancer in front of your VMs just to balance your traffic across your instances. You set up an auto scaling group that scales VMs in and out based on metrics such as utilization. And finally, you set up a CI/CD pipeline where as you're building and deploying new versions of your applications, you're essentially cycling through new VMs and deploying new versions of your applications. So this is a typical application architecture which you'd need to run a web application in the cloud. And before I walk you through the options of how you can run it and where App Runner fits in, there is a concept on AWS called the shared responsibility, where the application and operational stability is actually shared between AWS and the customer. And why specifically I want to bring this up is over the years, what we've seen with newer and newer services is more of the infrastructure is fully managed by AWS. So you as the customer has a lesser surface area to manage, and you focus on your apps and not the infrastructure. But before we actually get there, let's take a look at the options you have for running these applications. You can run on EC2 instances today. And we have seen plenty of customers run EC2 instances at scale. So in this model, when you're operating this way, AWS manages the physical server and the hypervisor, but you're responsible for provisioning EC2 instances. You're responsible for the OS language runtime and the application. You're responsible for the load balancer. You can use an ALB. And you set up an auto scaling group. And finally, you have your CI/CD pipeline. So operated in this way, you're actually responsible for both the application and infrastructure. And what you benefit from that is control. You can actually control a lot of these layers, and plenty of customers like this level of control. And you pay for the infrastructure resources themselves. So you pay for your load balancers, you pay for your instances. If you look at your AWS bill, you'll see multiple line items in your bill. What we heard from customers who are operating EC2 is, hey, there's a lot of moving parts. Can you simplify that for us? And that's where AWS Elastic Beanstalk comes in. So what we did was we created a service that helps you orchestrate all of these components behind a really simplified interface. So Beanstalk has this concept of a Beanstalk environment, and a Beanstalk environment behind the scenes orchestrates the load balancing, the auto scaling, and the compute. So you can really focus on your applications. So operated this way, you have control over your applications and you have control over your infrastructure. However, here you have help from Elastic Beanstalk to just manage your infrastructure resources better and simplify that ongoing management process. Since the infrastructure resources are running in your account, you actually pay for these resources. So Beanstalk is a free service. So you'd see if you look at your AWS bill, you see your load balancer and your EC2 instance are charged separately. So you pay for all of these infrastructure resources as they run in your account. Now, AWS App Runner. What we heard from customers is, hey, I'm okay. Beanstalk helps me orchestrate my infrastructure, and that's great. But what if there's no infrastructure in my account? Can you make it infrastructureless or serverless? Can AWS take more responsibility in the whole shared responsibility equation? And that's exactly what we did with the AWS App Runner. So all of these resources that typically run in your account, be it your language runtimes, be it the load balancer, be it auto scaling, or be it the CI/CD pipelines, all of them is fully managed by AWS. And what you really provision on app runners is just your applications. And this also makes a really interesting angle in the billing and pricing, is that you just pay for these applications, and you pay for these applications when they're processing requests. So given that there's a huge shift in the shared responsibility model, and there's a lot lesser surface area you have to manage with AWS App Runner when you're running web applications, let's take a look at some of the benefits it affords you. The first is you're running apps on infrastructure, so you have a better developer productivity. You don't have to focus on the layers of infrastructure and patching and managing them. So it helps you really iterate and build faster. The second is you have a lot of best practices built into the service. For instance, you have built-in blue-green deployments without any infrastructure components. It just helps in safer rollout of software. You have automatic scaling. So App Runner scales up and down very elastically. It doesn't provision EC2 instances in your account. It does it behind the scenes through containers. App Runner runs all your applications in containers, but we also add an additional virtual machine boundary for these containers, so you get security and isolation benefits with inbuilt defense in depth. You have integrated observability. If you're used to containers and operating web applications in a container orchestrator, you usually, to set up observability, you have daemon sets or sidecars, and those are additional moving parts you manage. But with App Runner, you don't need them. It's fully integrated. And finally, you have granular pricing, where you essentially pay for when your application is processing requests, and you're priced based on your applications and not the underlying infrastructure. So given that you have all of these benefits, how do you use AWS App Runner? So I'm going to spend a bunch of my time here with walking you through the product itself. But just before I do that, I'm just going to walk you through a conceptual model on what the user experience is. And you'll see this later as well. Is you have developers. deploying their code, be it Node or Python, to either a source code repository, be it GitHub, or if they're using containers, they can package it as containers and upload it to ECR, Amazon ECR as a container registry. Then what we do is App Runner creates a connection or creates an IAM role to access your code or your ECR resources. And then what you do is, okay, now that you've allowed App Runner to access your code, you have to create an App Runner service. This is a very, very small template to say how you want your application to run, be it vCPU, memory, or health checks, any auto scaling. And finally, what you get at the end of it is an HTTPS endpoint, a secure URL, where your application runs, and clients can start hitting this endpoint with sending requests, and the computation happens, and you get your response. So that's the experience at a very high level. And without further ado, let me jump into the demo part of this and walk you through four parts, four steps here. First is I'm going to create a service, and I'm going to actually show you features with deployments. And I'm going to show you some of the built-in observability you get with App Runner. And finally, I'm going to walk into the pricing and the cost visibility portion of App Runner. So let me switch to the AWS console right now. This is my AWS console. So AWS App Runner should be listed here. So I already have mine open. So it's just AWS App Runner here. And I'm actually going to create a new service from scratch and walk you through that experience. So I'm just going to hit Create Service. I'm just going to zoom in my screen such that you can see it clearer. So there are three steps here. You essentially tell us where your source code or sits. It's either a container registry or essentially directly from GitHub. You configure a little bit about your service. It's just like a blueprint on how to run your service, and you just hit run and you create your service. It's a super simple steps, very few steps. So let's go through them. So we have two options for container registry. It's ECR or ECR public. We launched a new feature with ECR public, which I'll show you later, which makes it super easy to integrate with App Runner. But you can essentially host your source code in either one of these two locations. You can also use GitHub, where you can essentially tell us, hey, fetch my code from GitHub, and App Runner will also do that. For this particular demo, I'm going to choose a container registry. I'm going to use Amazon ECR, and I have a specific demo called the App Runner demo here. I'm just going to select that, hit continue. Then you have additional options, which is whether you want a manual or automatic deployments. Manual deployments is you can choose when you want to deploy a new version of your App Runner service. By default, as we discussed before, all deployments are blue-green. You can also have an automatic deployment setup. And what this means is App Runner will listen to changes in your repo and automatically deploy a new version of your service. So think about use cases such as you're developing applications and you constantly want to see your changes live in the cloud, and you can set this up. And it's a pretty handy feature there. You give us an access role. In this case, it's the ECR access role, and which allows App Runner to fetch the images from ECR. I hit next. This app is essentially a to-do app, so I just say to-do test. I specify vCPU and memory. This is essentially the amount of compute resources that App Runner will provision for one specific container. And App Runner will scale those containers horizontally based on incoming requests, but each size of that container is specified here. You can, of course, change this if you'd like. You can add some environment variables here, maybe some connection strings. You can add them here. This particular app does not need them. You specify your port. I think this particular example used I'm using the Docker sample application here. And I think it uses the port 3000. So I'm just going to enter port 3000 here. There are many additional configurations here, specifically auto scaling. This is all optional, of course, but you can you get auto scaling out of the box with App Runner, but you can customize it. You can specify how many concurrent requests are sent to each container of size, what you've defined here. You can also specify the maximum number of instances you want us to scale, or container instances you want us to scale to. And this could be for reasons such as cost control. You can have health checks. So you want to specify, how your application is healthy. So you can add your health checks here. There are additional properties on security where you can specify an instance role and this is like similar to an EC2 instance role, or if you've used ECS, it's like the task role, where you don't have to bake AWS credentials into your applications. You can also use KMS key to encrypt the data. And finally, there's tags, and tags is totally optional as well. But as you'll see later, tags give you a very interesting way to visualize your costs per application. So you can add your tags here as you please, and this can be your dev app or prod app or whatever you want to tag your application. Hit next. You just review it. It looks good to me. And that's pretty much it. You just deploy your application. AWS App Runner will go ahead and fetch your container image from this repo, and it'll deploy your application. And once it's ready, it'll be accessible at this endpoint. It's going to take a few minutes to deploy. As you can see, it's pending. In the interim, I'm going to move to other parts of the demo while this deploys simultaneously. So the next part of the demo I wanted to show you is, I just walked through service creation. I want to show you our deployment features. So I have a service here which is already created. It's just a simple Node.js. I think it's an Express web server which just says hello world. And as I open it here, as you can see, it's just a very simple hello world example. It essentially is an application that runs from source code here, which is essentially a GitHub repo. And if you see the configuration, the deployment configuration of this application, I've set it up to automatic deployments. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to the source code and change the message. As you see now, it said hello world. I'm just going to say, okay, I'm just going to go to the index.js and change from hello world to hi. So I'm just going to hit commit. What you'll see is App Runner will detect that there's a new version of my source code, and it'll start deploying a new version of your App Runner service. Let's give it a second. Boom, there you go. So it's actually deployed. There's a start deployment in process. And if you look at the activity tab also, you'd see that the deployment is in progress. And also your old endpoint will continue to run and be stable. And we only route traffic to your new versions, which this will change from hello world to what we changed it here, which is hi, only when the new version is healthy. So you get that built-in safety in deployments, and you get added benefit in features such that, whenever you change your new version of whenever you change your source code, we'll automatically deploy a new version of the application for you. So let this, as this is getting deployed, I want to, as both of them are getting deployed, I want to show you another feature, which is some of the observability features you get with App Runner. So with App Runner, there's a lot of built-in goodness here in terms of there's an activity stream where you can see what the service is doing for you behind the scenes as you take action on the service. There are 3 log streams. The first one is essentially a log stream where you have App Runner taking actions on your behalf, and you can see all of that show up here. The working backwards here has been customers saying, hey, I don't want App Runner to be a black box, but I actually want to see what's going on underneath the hood. And that's something you can see here. There is deployment logs. For this particular application, it's not that relevant because it's a container image. But let's say you were using deploying from source code. You can see your npm build or your pip install requirements.txt all show up here in your deployment logs. And finally, there is your application logs themselves. This is your web server emitting events as it's getting requests coming in to process. And as you can see here, it's processed some requests successfully. seems to have some problems here. But you get out-of-the-box application logs here. There's also a bunch of metrics, which I'll show you later on. But metrics, we have a very customized application metrics here for you to view metrics out of the box. You can also set custom domains with App Runner, where you have this endpoint. You can link to a custom domain, but that's totally optional, and that's up to you to set up a custom domain. But what you see here is App Runner gives you a lot of out-of-the-box logs, metrics, and activity to help you better observe your applications here, and you can also view the status here. Let's go back to some of our services. We see that our to-do application is now deployed. We just deployed this application. As you see, we just created the service, and I'm going to hit this endpoint, and you should see like a full application load. And it is a to-do app, and it works perfectly. Add an item. So this is essentially how easy it is to run an app on App Runner. And of course, a lot of the settings we went through were optional. If you want to run it even quicker, you can, but I just walk you through all the different options just for completeness. And you also see our other app here, which is our GitHub app, has also successfully deployed. So this message should change from hello world to hi. I think that's just a browser cache, but yeah, so here you see it's changed to hi. So it's super simple, easy to deploy new versions of your application, and App Runner will do it automatically and deploy it in a safe way behind the scenes. So we've taken a look at service creation, we've taken a look at deployments, we've taken a look at observability. Let's also take a look at cost visibility, because this is an important feature of the service, is how easy it is to view your costs and how the pricing model is super granular. So for cost visibility, I'm actually going to go to the AWS Cost Explorer. And in the Cost Explorer, I am going to just search for all my costs associated with AWS App Runner. Just going to go here. Click on Cost Explorer. I'm just going to click on AWS App Runner here. Just shows up here. And this gives me how much I'm spending on my service overall. I can also seek to a particular application. As I said, you can tag every application, and I've tagged one of my application, which is basically an API that talks to DynamoDB. And I can see how much that particular application was costing. I can even seek to a particular time frame. And I know during this time, I actually hit the app with a lot of requests. I can seek to a daily view, and I can also add this level of granularity by usage type. So let's spend some time here. So what this is essentially showing me is the daily costs of this particular application running in App Runner. So it's essentially the cost per application. It's super granular, and you can see that during these days, I was charged for both vCPU and memory, but during these days, I'm only charged for memory. And why this is so true is because during these days, I was actually hitting the application or the API with a lot of load. And that's why I've been charged for both vCPU and memory. But when there are no requests coming in, as I said, App Runner has a pricing that scales on requests. You don't pay for your vCPU anymore. You just pay for the memory that's provisioned. And the only reason you pay for this memory provision is you get consistently low millisecond latency for your applications because there's no cold starts. And of course, if you don't even want to incur a cost of 34 cents a day, you can pause the application and not incur this charge. So that shows you how easy and simple it is to actually view and manage your costs with App Runner. And that concludes the demo portion of AWS App Runner. Now, the next part of this presentation, I'm going to talk about Beanstalk and how it relates to App Runner. And what you'll see is Beanstalk and App Runner actually work pretty well together. And they're actually better. They're pretty portable with each other. And I'll show you through a few examples as well. But first, what is Elastic Beanstalk? I know we saw it conceptually before. Just to refresh your memory, Beanstalk is also a simple managed experience for running applications. I know this sounds familiar. It reads true with a lot of what App Runner said as well, where you're running web applications, APIs, and even workers. And what is the similarity between Beanstalk and App Runner, you ask, is you have an interface that really helps you focus and run your applications and not the underlying infrastructure. You use a source code or container image as ways to package and run your applications across both services. You have a bunch of built-in observability in both Beanstalk and App Runner, as I'll show you in the console screen later. And you also have built-in best practices on deployments with blue-green. So it's really integrated in terms of giving you a turnkey experience for running applications, and both these services are highly capable to do so. And I'm going to actually switch back to showing you the product itself. I'm just going to go through the Beanstalk console, show you how similar it actually is to the App Runner now that we saw the App Runner console. And I'm actually then going to deploy the same Node.js app on both Beanstalk and App Runner, just to show you how portable these two services really are. So back to the AWS console. I'm going to go to Elastic Beanstalk. Just give it a second to load. So here in Beanstalk, you'd say instead of App Runner services, you'd see environments. An environment is essentially a sandbox for a specific applications. You can see I have a bunch of applications running. I'm just going to hit one particular application here. It's called Test Environment 2. What you'll see here is how similar it is to App Runner is that there is an endpoint here. And you hit the endpoint. As you can see, this is a test application running on Beanstalk. You can see that you have a lot of event logs here, which is similar to what we saw in App Runner. You also have built-in log monitoring and health features, all kind of built into Beanstalk, just like how it is with App Runner. And just to make a point as to how easy and similar it is to port applications across these two services, I'm actually going to go to AWS, going back to AWS App Runner and deploy a sample Beanstalk app to it. So we have a bunch of tutorials here, which I already have open on Elastic Beanstalk. I'm going to download our Node.js sample, which is essentially this app which we saw here. And I'm going to deploy it to App Runner. So I just deployed I just downloaded the file. I'm just going to unzip it. And what I'm going to do is then essentially create a repo where I'm going to upload the source code, which I just downloaded. I'm just going to go to GitHub, create a new repo, EB node sample. I'm going to make it private. I'm just going to create a repository. And I'm going to upload the source code which we just created here, or rather which we just downloaded. I'm just going to open up this file and drag them and upload it to this repository. And then I'm just going to commit my changes. Of course, I'd add a friendly message there, but just for this demo, I'm just going to hit commit. So now that we have a repo with the sample app, all I'm going to do is go to App Runner and say, hey, run this app from this repo. So let's just go ahead and do that. I'm just going to go back to AWS App Runner here to the AWS console. I'm going to hit create service. And this is actually source code. So I'm just going to hit source code. And I think this was called EB node. I think this was the application which we created. Or this was the repo. EB node sample, actually. I think I have another sample which is very similar with called EB node. I'll just use that. Just give me 1 second. I'm just going to go through my repository. Yep, EB node also is the same file, so I'll just use that. And the branch is main. I'm going to select a manual deployment. I'm going to hit next. I'm going to choose a runtime. I know this is a Node.js app, so I'm just going to call it Node.js. I'm just going to use the build command of npm install, and I think my file was basically index.js, or actually app.js it should be the right file. I need a port number for this particular application just to help me remember the port number. I do have a already deployed version of this application, so I'm just going to pull up what the port number is. Here we go. Configuration, port 3000. So I'm going to just enter port 3000 here. And then I hit next and create a name, EB sample test. All of this checks out. I'm going to hit next. And finally, I'm going to hit create and deploy. So that was pretty much all there is to porting an application between Beanstalk and App Runner. As you saw, I downloaded the sample app from Beanstalk samples. I just uploaded it to a repo, and I asked App Runner to fetch that repo and deploy the app. So I already have the app deployed here. It's the same app. As you can see, the source code is exactly the same. This is the app, the Beanstalk sample app, and it's already deployed here and successfully running. And I can hit the endpoint, and you can see that this is running on AWS and you have the default Beanstalk app, Node.js app deployed on App Runner. So now that you saw that, I walked you through the Beanstalk console, and we even deployed a Node.js app to show you how portable these two services are. Let's take a look and see how they're different. So with Beanstalk today, you can run web applications, APIs. You can also run worker applications such as machine learning. We have some customers running machine learning apps on Beanstalk. On App Runner, you can run web applications only. That's what the service runs today. So you have more selection of application types to run on Beanstalk relative to App Runner. With Beanstalk, you get to customize more of the infrastructure. As we saw earlier before in one of the slides, that all of those infrastructure resources actually run in your account. So you can actually go and tweak some of those knobs, and you can configure and customize as you see fit. On App Runner, it's serverless. There's nothing in your account. You're just running apps, so you don't get that degree of flexibility, but you also get the simplicity that comes with not having to deal with all of the infrastructure components. In Beanstalk, you pay for a resource model where you're paying for your EC2 and your load balancers separately. Whereas in App Runner, it's a very integrated billing model where I showed earlier in the demo with App Runner how it's all built in, and you can easily view your costs. With Beanstalk, you pay for those resources independent of your request traffic. So you can set up, of course, auto-scaling groups to scale by your requests, but you're paying for infrastructure resources. Whereas in App Runner, you're paying for containers that scale with traffic, but it's highly granular and it scales with requests. So it's really a model which is a pricing model which is very granular. Just going through the demo on some of the differences on how you can customize on Beanstalk. So I'm just going to go back to the Beanstalk console, and I'm switching between consoles, but trust me, the services are pretty similar. So I go back to the Beanstalk console. I go back to our familiar Node.js app, which we just deployed. Here, there is a specific setting called configuration. Here, while configuring, you have many knobs. As you can see here, you can configure your EC2 instance types. You can configure your load balancers, your load balancer listening. You can set up custom routing rules, how you want to do your rolling updates. So there are a lot of knobs that you get here. Whereas on App Runner, all you see is a bunch of services. So because you don't manage all of the underlying resources, so you get a lot of configurability in Beanstalk, whereas on App Runner you get a really simple, opinionated way to run applications. Beanstalk, you get that as well, but you have this override ability to configure the infrastructure resources. The other part I wanted to show you in how they're different is the Cost Explorer. We saw how it is in how App Runner was easy to view your costs. With Beanstalk, if you go to your AWS bill, you won't see any service called Elastic Beanstalk, because Beanstalk is actually a free service. But your costs will actually be distributed across multiple line items in your bill, be it load balancers, EC2. So all of the underlying infrastructure resources are being provisioned in your account, and you're paying for them separately. So you get this piecemeal model of billing, where you need to figure out your costs across EC2 and something like a load balancer for your applications. Whereas on App Runner, it's super simplified, and it's just a service called App Runner here, and you can view your costs quite simply. Given that we've seen some of these similarities and differences between the two services, and actually gone to the console screen, deployed the same app, showed you where they're similar, showed you where they differ, when should you use what? So the general guidance is just to start with AWS App Runner. It's a simpler operational model. You get better cost model. The pricing is a lot more granular. You also don't manage as much surface area as you do with Beanstalk. But of course, App Runner will be adding more features over time, which Beanstalk has been around for a while, and App Runner will reach parity. We're going to continue to add features, as you'll see in our roadmap later. If you need additional control, for instance, you want to run a specific instance type, and you want to say, hey, I want to go to my more configuration and have control over a specific instance type, you can absolutely use Elastic Beanstalk. And if you're on Beanstalk and happy today, we'll continue to support you. You can continue using Beanstalk. We're going to roll out new runtime versions. And as you'll see in the roadmap later, we have more features coming up for you as well. And this is actually an important message, where your choice is not a one-way door. A one-way door is a concept here in Amazon where you make a decision, you can easily go back on it. A one-way door is something which you can't go back on it. This choice of choosing Beanstalk or App Runner is not a one-way door. You can easily choose between one service or the other. And as I've showed you in the demo here, is you can take the same app and you just upload it to GitHub and ask App Runner to fetch it and deploy it to App Runner. And just port it as simply as that. So now that we've taken a look at what App Runner is, what Beanstalk is, what are the differences, what's the similarities, let's take a look at the roadmap. But first, before I walk through the features, I want to say that both our roadmaps are on GitHub. It's a public roadmap. We get a lot of feedback from customers. It's been really exciting to see feedback from use cases, different use cases which customers have. And as we progress through launching these features, we update our roadmap saying, hey, this is coming soon. And even if it's not coming soon, and when we're researching it, we also ask for feedback from customers. So it's very participatory. We get a lot of input on how we should build our new features. Both App Runner and Beanstalk have roadmaps on GitHub. So please leave us feedback on our roadmap if there's any feature you'd like us to build. So coming back to the roadmap itself, App Runner, what we're going to do is we're going to launch a bunch of features to enhance developer productivity. For instance, today, you can't modify a failed service on App Runner. A developer has to recreate a service if it's failed and to fix it. Of course, this adds to a lot of redundancy. So we've heard from customers, hey, can I just modify something that's failed? And that's going to be a lot easier. And sure, we will launch a feature that will allow customers to do that. Customers want to view how their requests are traversing across AWS. So we're going to launch built-in X-ray support. We're going to launch more runtimes. As you saw today, we have runtimes on App Runner with Java and Node. With Python and Node, I should say. We're going to add Java support as well. So if you have your Java apps, you can run it on App Runner easily. Or you can, of course, If you have a runtime which is not supported today, you can containerize it and run it on App Runner, because App Runner supports containers natively. We're going to launch, this is our most asked feature on our roadmap, to allow App Runner services to connect to private resources in a VPC. And this can be an RDS database, an Elastic Cache, all of the data services, such that the App Runner service can talk to some of the data services we have at AWS, be it RDS or Elastic Cache or Amazon MQ for a queue service. Then we're going to ship private App Runner services. As you saw, the endpoint today on App Runner is public, so clients can access them over the internet. Maybe you have applications that you want to be accessed only within your private Amazon VPC. So we'll build a feature which allows you to lock down that endpoint to your private VPC. So that's the App Runner roadmap. We have more going forward, but as I said, give us feedback. Coming to the Beanstalk roadmap, we have two features coming up. One is Graviton. This is our most asked feature, where customers want better price performance and to use Graviton instances with Beanstalk. And the second one is, of course, with Beanstalk today, you can also provision a database. But what we learned from customers is they wanted their data to be decoupled from their application. Today, they're coupled. So we're launching a feature that allows you to decouple your database from your compute layer. So that's our roadmap across these two services. I hope I've added value to your day. And happy running. We have a lot of resources to get up and running and get started. So hope you had fun in this presentation, and look forward to your feedback on our roadmap. Thank you very much.